Welcome back to Middle Fingers Up. I'm your host, Kieran. Today's guest is someone who doesn't just work with stories, she lives them. Salima Saxton is an accredited relational dynamics coach, writer, performer, communication trainer, someone who just really thrives on helping people find their voice, whether it's on stage, in conversation, or in the thing we call life. She supports women navigating transitions like entrepreneurship. I'm so glad I said that word. I had to practice it 100 times. Leadership, motherhoodship, all the ships that we are navigating in life. And she's really here to help us women reconnect to ourselves and maybe even find that power within that we deny all the time. Salima is also the co-host of the podcast Women Are Mad, where she and psychotherapist Jennifer Cox invite guests to explore their emotions, kind of like starting from the radical launch pad of anger. And, you know, they're there to remind us that even the emotions we've been taught to fear, those emotions can be powerful and they guide us back to ourselves, to home. Today, I'm inviting you all to be part of a woman-to-woman convo about the things that we learn the hard way, the growth we never saw coming, and the ways we find and lose ourselves along the way. So whether you're someone that's just working on your own transition or simply holding space for others, I really hope you hear a piece of yourself through this conversation. Let's get into it. Salima, welcome to Middle Fingers Up. Hi, how are you?
Very well. That was the most poetic introduction I think I've ever had. It was beautiful.
Oh, well, you made it easy. And you know what? Like, before we get into anything, I want to thank you. Never have I had someone respond to my DMs. I never know the terms so quick. Mm-hmm. I fell in love, in the most respectful, consensual, supportive, kind way with you. When I saw you on the Moth Pod, I believe it was a clip that went viral. I got to learn a little bit about you in the real raw way. And in there, you talked about just how you found your voice in the midst of fears that many of us live through, and going through some of my own stuff that hit hard in a great way. It was like early morning, I'm watching it in bed and I had to message you. And I was like, oh my gosh, when you replied back. And so I am so, so grateful to be sitting here and that you trust to have this conversation with me today. So thank you so much for being here.
Such a pleasure. And I also am so happy to speak to a woman of South Asian descent who's working in the podcast space. So hi.
Hi. Hello. Welcome. I always ask my guests too, I did the intro, but is there anything that you want to add to it or that I missed? Because you wear a lot of hats and I don't want to miss any of the hats that you wear. So
no, I think you covered it. And also I like that it's all quite fluid. So it all comes back to storytelling, whether I'm writing, whether I'm acting, whether I'm podcasting, even when I'm coaching, actually, because that's other people's stories and for them to learn to tell their own story, I suppose, in their own way. It all comes back to storytelling.
Yeah. And you said fellow South Asian woman. And I think something that we can connect with is our childhood in many ways was all about storytelling, whether it be through the Indian film industry, our music, the food, the culture, family gatherings, all sorts of things really came down to even the gossiping of the women and the men. It's all through storytelling. And so I'd love to start at the beginning of your story. Maybe you can share a little bit about what little Salima was like growing up. We can kind of get into it from there.
Sure. So I grew up in the British countryside, so in a thatched house. I don't think you have them where you are, thatched houses.
What is that? Maybe we do, but it's a different word. I don't know.
Kind of like a Canadian friend of mine said, it's like a house she'd imagine Little Red Riding Hood to grow up in. Like, the roofs are made of straw, I suppose. It's like an ancient English thing.
Oh my
English
gosh.
cost
Yes.
often. And so the house was like 500, 600 years old. So I grew up in a little village in a thatched house with my younger sister, my Pakistani mother, and my English father. What was I like as a child? Well, I was somebody who read under my bed covers with a torch. I was obsessed by books and storytelling even back then. But it was partly because I was a real anxious kid. Like, I struggled with anxiety. It came out in lots of different ways. But I suppose the root of my anxiety was really because my parents had quite a tricky marriage. My dad was an alcoholic. My mum was the only Pakistani, you know, for miles and miles, like 80s British countryside. You know, she didn't grow up in a big South Asian community, like from her 20s onwards. You know, she was very isolated. So I had quite a lonely mum. They had a very difficult marriage. He was an alcoholic, you know, or I now understand that's what he was. So it looked really idyllic, my childhood. We used to like run across the fields. Our neighbours had a swimming pool that we would like crawl through the fences to like swim in. Beautiful like rose gardens, like books everywhere. Like my parents were quite artistic, I suppose, had lots of parties. So it looked like a very bohemian, beautiful childhood. But that really was only part of it, because there was a real undercurrent, you know, which really came from my dad. You know, I was a hypervigilant kid. I think that's what they call it. So I was always expecting things to change. I was always feeling things out. And I think if you grow up with an addict as a parent, even if the other parent is certainly not that, and my mother wasn't that in any way, my mum was very much the stabilizing force, you know, she really did what she could, you know, within that. If you grow up with an addict as a parent, I think it's very difficult to shake off a lot of the habits that one might form as a kid. I was the eldest as well. I was my mother's confidant as well, because my mom was isolated from the rest of her family, who were all back in Pakistan. So I always felt much older than I actually was. I wasn't really a kid that played. Like, my most favorite thing was to lie in the hammock and read books, you know, and that's cool. But I wasn't a kid who like did a lot of dress up and things. I've always felt older than everybody else in my class, and I was quite serious in a way. I've got less and less and less serious as I've got older. So Salima as a child, yeah, I really want to give her a hug, like a 10-year-old Salima, when I think about her, because she was very earnest. She was really trying her hardest. She was like quite a friendly kid, but she was always looking for safety, I think, emotional safety, even like at school. You know, so those kind of things did give me some superpowers, you know, in that I became very agile socially, because I was very good at reading social situations. You know, I had a very bad habit for a long time of being quite a social chameleon, but doing it very well, you know, being very easy company for other people. But that was because I morphed and I made things comfortable for everybody else. So if you give up yourself, yeah, you can be the best company sometimes for some people, right? Because you're like, no worries. Yeah, I'll eat that. I'll go there. You know, I'll fix that. I'll sort that. No problem. You know, you can be a kind of easy person to be around, but I've become a lot more difficult, a lot more cantankerous even as I've got older, as I've worked out what I actually like to do. I didn't really know what I loved when I was a kid, because I was very, very busy making it all right for everybody else.
Thank you. Thank you for giving it like it was and not sugarcoating it. And I hear so many little side quests in what you talk about. A child that doesn't get to really grow up with the creativity, imagination, maybe even innocence that we lose as we get older. And it sounds like you reversed it. You're looking for it and finding it as you get older. and then a child that is growing up trying to manage a traumatic situation with a parent that's an addict, like you said, hypervigilant, walking into a room, trying to figure it out as a survival skill. And some of us grow up and think, oh, I'm a people pleaser, and oh, I'm, in a perfectionism, I'm these sorts of things. And I don't know, like life is so interesting. It almost reveals itself backwards. Like we experience these stories, and then only when we get older or at a different time in life, we're like, oh, that's why I did what I did. Oh, that's why I am who I am. And so as you're nodding along, kind of agreeing to that. Hey, I don't know if you want to add to that or not, this whole backwards kind of way that we experience these things. Where you're at now, you're also a mother, you're a wife, you have this career. What parts of that childhood and that growing up do you sort of carry with you? And what parts do you think you've had to let go?
Well, I think parenting for me, becoming a mother, was such a moment, as I'm sure it is for everybody, of traveling back in time to my own childhood, the good and the bad, right? And the same for my husband, actually. So we had 3 children in relatively quick succession, and every child that we had, I suppose it unraveled us more in a good way, bringing us back to ourselves. It was with the birth of my 3rd child that I decided I was going to estrange myself from my dad, because I'd got to that point by then that it wasn't tenable that I continue a relationship with him, and it was impacting hugely on my relationship with my children, and I didn't want him to be around my children. But it took like having 3 children, it was like, the first was born and I thought this, and the second, it was like layer by layer. And it's funny because I wanted 4 children. I had this idea I was going to have a massive family, which I kind of now understand, to your point about going backwards and understanding. Of course, I wanted 4+ children because I was starting like from the beginning, right? Yeah. So I was like, okay, here we go. And it was my husband who was like, 4 kids will like push us over the edge. And he was right. Actually, I didn't want 4 children for the right kind of reasons. I wanted 4 to kind of envelop me. And that's not a reason to have a child, obviously. So, but anyway, with each child, that was something that really moved mountains for me in terms of my own childhood, because, well, this, like when you look at your own children, you suddenly then go, oh, right, my parents did this for me or didn't do this, or, oh my God, they reacted like this. How did that work? Because I know how I feel about this child of mine. How would I do that? So it was like piecing it together. For those of us who have had, some complicated elements of their childhood, it can be quite painful, I think, those early years of having your own children, because you remember things that you'd really kind of packed neatly away. I found the early years of having children, obviously, they're kind of packed full of adrenaline anyway, aren't they? And like lack of sleep, coffee, just like pushing the double buggy with a 3rd one in the sling. Like, I never want to see another zoo again in my entire life. Like I've got a few things: zoos, fish cakes, hummus, certain theme tunes. There's a show in Britain called Peppa Pig.
Yeah.
If I even hear the few notes of Peppa Pig, I kind of get this like weird feeling in my stomach. It's not to say that it wasn't like glorious and amazing and fantastic to have these 3 little tiny children, but it was a really intense time, and so much came out for me at that point, particularly with choosing to estrange myself from my dad at that point, which was the right decision. I'm still aware it was the right decision, but it took a lot of work. I didn't just do it on a whim. Yeah. I was in therapy. It was a very long and big decision for me, not something that I talk about it a lot, because I want to take the shame out of actions like that, with one's own family of origin. It's not something that is for everybody, needed for anybody, and nor would I recommend it in any way. It's a massive thing. But I think it's important to say that sometimes estrangement is a needed path.
Yeah, I think it's like no win necessarily, but it's our kids are the time machines that we go back in every day when we're parenting or learning something about them through us, through them. And for me, a lot of what you're saying hits home because I had so much anger over the years towards my parents, and they listen to every single one of these episodes too. So they're so great because they're so open to like the healing we've been doing together. Yeah. But I think the kids are what helped me realize, oh, okay, I maybe owe my parents a bit of an understanding and empathy. But then there are these boundaries too that I start to put up. And I think when I hear you talking about the estrangement, it's like, they say it's so exciting when we break barriers as a next generation, but sometimes breaking barriers is also isolating. And it's also scary because we're doing something for the first time as, you know, descendants of our ancestors, our parents and whoever, and no one's really done this before us in our family. And so saying, you know, okay, I need to have this space for my father. Nobody wants to get to that place. Nobody wants to do that. And so for you to have to work through that, you know why you had to do that and you have to live with that every day. And so on one hand, you're addressing shame, but then you're living with guilt in some ways too of, did I do this right? Or should I have done it? And so it's like, that's why I say it's not a win-win.
It's not a win-win. And also for me, it wasn't guilt so much, but I used to obsess over him dying and, you know, that we weren't going to have this Hollywood ending where, you know, he would speak to me and say, you know, forgive me, I love you. I would say, I love you. And then he would die peacefully. You know, what actually happened is that I found out he'd passed away 18 months ago. And it's very complicated to grieve somebody you're estranged from, because first you have to grieve the lack of a Hollywood ending and then kind of work backwards, right? But it's funny because a question I was asked a lot in the first few months of his death was, oh gosh, do you wish you could have seen him? You know, do you wish you could have gone to the hospital? Do you wish, you know, you would have known? And I wasn't really sure at the time. I think I even said yes to some people because I thought that was the answer I was meant to give. Now I would tell you that I categorically wouldn't have wanted that because he couldn't have transformed in those last few months or last few weeks. I mean, maybe he could have done, but I doubt it. Maybe he could have done. I don't know. I can't imagine that we suddenly get wisdom in the last few days or weeks. Maybe we get some insights, but I don't know whether we totally can transform to that degree. Yeah. And I'm finally, it's taken me quite a while, but I'm finally at peace with understanding that there aren't neat kind of like bows, you know, these kind of relationships. You know, the story generally isn't, and I hope it will be for anybody who's listening to this who may be dealing with estrangement or something. It can happen, of course, and people can change and people can acknowledge who they are and whatever. But, you know, what I really realize is that a lot of life is not neatly packaged up or finished, nor do you get the answers, right? Like I had a friendship which ended, it's like the one female friendship where I was essentially ghosted. This is about 7-8 years ago. And it was really heartbreaking for me at the time. And people would say to me, I'm sure you'll get on, I'm sure you'll find out, I'm sure you'll kind of get it. I never really did find out. I kind of found out more about what she was and her patterns and things. So it began to make sense to me. Oh, that's why I saw those behaviors. And that's why I didn't necessarily see them as red flags at the time. So that's been my piece, say, with that female friendship and the ghosting. But much like my dad's death, I've just, in a similar way, I've kind of understood that, yeah, that's why he was like that. That's why I had that response to that. That's okay, I had that response, and it's really understandable. And it's really understandable I protected myself and my 3 children from having that input into our lives.
Yeah.
It's taken me a long time to get to this. It wasn't effortless.
And honestly, am triggered or take offense to even the question of like, do you wish ... Because it's like hindsight's a bitch, and we can't live in hindsight. And sometimes when we make these decisions, we can't control the outcome. So even if that person that you're estranged with makes a life, 180 change, good on them. But you know what I mean? Like you're not like, oh, now we're friends on again. Like you've moved on and grown in ways that, like you're not the same person you were when you made that thing. So sometimes I'm like, why do we like ask those kinds of questions? Because we're not who we were at that time too.
Exactly. And also, like that's what was good for me then. And yeah, maybe there could have been a moment where he said, I love you. I said, I love you. He said, I'm sorry. And I said, I forgive you. Maybe there could have been that, but maybe there couldn't have been that. And I'll never know that.
Yeah.
I will never, ever know that. So what I try and do now is just think, as you say, that was right for me then. And then he passed away. I didn't see him before he passed away, but it's more about those memories that I have from him when I was tiny. I can remember some good things. He wasn't like a demon. There are some good elements to him, and I can recognize that now. Or even like his love of jazz or his love of nature, painting. I've inherited a lot of those traits, and I wouldn't have wanted to have said that 5-10 years ago. I would have always said, I'm nothing. I used to say, I'm nothing like you. I'm nothing like you. There are overlaps.
Right.
But I never enjoyed his company because I was always either stressed by it, or he was drunk, or I was worried he was about to be. So I can't remember enjoying his company. I was regularly very embarrassed by him, his behaviors, and I was regularly frightened by him. So what would that scene have looked like if he then said, I'm so sorry, when he knew he was dying? I've often thought about that in this last 18 months, because maybe he would have been very sorry because he knew he was dying. But does that negate all those years of craziness? I'm not so sure. I love him in my heart, and that's the most important thing. I no longer carry anger towards my dad or bitterness. Like he even asked that I not attend his funeral, and he cut me out of his will. So they were pretty punchy things, 18 months ago. But despite those decisions of his, I understand that they come from a man who was furious at the world for very many reasons. And that is not how I choose to live my life. So I I can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel empathy for him now he's dead. I haven't visited his grave, nor do I want to, but I can have some fondness for him in my heart now, despite some of the monstrous ways he behaved. It's taken me such a long time to get here.
For sure. And I wonder too, like, when you take some space too from this conversation or down the way, it's like that's you also experiencing your growth. Sometimes we don't know we're growing and we're evolving, and then when we have these moments or conversations, it's like, oh, I can't believe I'm saying this, or I don't have a weird feeling with it. And it's again one of those things where things are happening backwards, and we're like, oh, again. And maybe it's your dad's death, but some of it also, I wonder, is like your own making peace with those side quests and things that happened with his alcoholism, and how you had to kind of adapt to some of that too. And so I think my thing is life is just a funny way of showing up when we least expect it. And then we're like, oh, I guess I have to, sometimes like you're growing and you don't even want to admit it or want to, because you only know that feeling, and maybe it's anger or hurt or whatever, or sadness. And you're like, this is all I know and I hate it, but it's the safest thing. Now I have to adapt to being a better person. Like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to have empathy for this person or this situation. Sometimes it's like so weird that we like resist some of that good stuff too.
Oh, totally. And also because I think sometimes whatever the habit is, we're just comfortable in it.
Yeah.
It's a bit like a friend of mine has a book agent, and I said, do you know what? I think your relationship with your book agent is like the relationship you had with all your boyfriends so far. She's currently single for good reason, because, the relationships she's had in her life thus far with boyfriends have been, well, with her trying to please them being a little bit gaslighty, her making it better for everybody else. And she was like, oh my God, yeah, I've picked that agent because I'm really comfortable in that dynamic. Yeah. Like I recognize it. I know how to deal with that kind of character, So she's looking for a new agent anyway. But but I thought, yeah, it's interesting. Like, we're attracted to what we know often, but the thing is, if what you know is not that straightforward and not that healthy, you can still be attracted to it, right?
Right. Yeah. Can I ask you about, like, as you were growing up and learning, reading books in your hammocks and becoming a young girl, adolescent, to becoming a woman, like, what spoken or unspoken messages did you internalize about what it means to be or become, say, as a woman?
Oh, get on with it. Get up. Do it, regardless of how you feel. Wash your face if you've been crying. Smile. Hold yourself together. Come on, pull yourself together, and don't complain.
Do you feel like you carry some of those with you today, or have you had to, like, fight through them? Maybe they shaped you.
I think in my 40s, I worked really hard to put them all down, and to know that rest is really important, to know that turning up unfiltered or relatively unfiltered, relatively truthful. I'm not always a fan when people say show your authentic self, because, it's not always safe to show all of yourself, and it depends what the company is. But I'm very aware that I'm not that little Salima anymore who makes it all right for everybody else. I'm still pretty personable and whatever. I definitely very consciously turn up as myself. There isn't a switch. Somebody was watching our podcast earlier. They were just observing it for this screenplay that they're writing. And she said, it was so funny because when you guys started, I was like, have they started? And then, yeah. She said, there's no switch.
Yeah.
And that's a really important part of my life.
Yeah.
That and that informs my coaching work. That informs everything that I do, really. I teach leadership to really proper blue chip corporates. And I always talk about leadership looking so different for each of us. And so actually one of the most powerful tools that you have is your very individual voice. And it's just about honing what your magic is, your skill set. Have you got a little dark humor? That can infuse your leadership. Or do you remember statistics? Absolutely, so easily. Well, that can inform it. You can drop fact. Are you great at giving great big stirring speeches, or are you better one-on-one? Or I don't know, even your sportsmanship or whatever. So I think turning up as ourselves is really the superpower for all of us. So, and I think few of us do it.
Yeah.
Most of us, we've all got certain levels of masks, right? And it's appropriate that we have some of that just to rub along together in society or in companies.
We can show parts and shield other parts, and that's okay.
And it can be professional, it can still be appropriate, but you can share some I always say vulnerability is very much part of leadership, but it obviously depends on how, you're not going to go into a boardroom sobbing, but you could share a vulnerable moment of failure, which then leaded later to success, perhaps. But it's about having the confidence, I suppose, to trust your voice. And then once you trust your voice, I think it's much easier to tune into what you're good at, right? Because once you've tuned into what we're good at, then I think things happen in your life. Stuff starts to kick off. I think once you're oh yeah, those are my people. That's my world. Oh, I really fit into that kind of thing.
Right. How do you encourage women to go on that journey of like finding that voice or trusting themselves? Because a lot like how you were taught to grow up, I feel like this would resonate with a lot of women listening today of saying, yeah, that's how I am even now, like get it together and go take care of everyone else before me. And I think women from every race could relate to that we've all been taught to be someone else's cheerleader. And so how do we work on being our own cheerleader, as cliche as that kind of sounds? But how do I whip out my own pom-poms and say, okay, like I matter too, and I'm figuring out my voice. It's like sometimes so scary to find your voice when you've never had the opportunity or been encouraged to do. And I think a lot of women sort of fit that.
I really agree with you. One thing that I do often in my coaching is we write a eulogy, your own eulogy. And it's quite a moving moment, actually. People find it surprisingly revealing about who they are and what they want. Because also, I talk a lot about death, and I mean, because I think we should all live with the idea that we're going to die, because I think that really is the only way we're going to get anything done that is right for us in this life, as opposed to just being busy, for the sake of it. And so, yeah, when I coach people, that's kind of where we start.
Can I just say this is refreshing? We always write love letters to ourselves. I've never heard someone write. I literally am going to end this conversation and go write my eulogy, because I'm in my head right now. Everything's dancing. Like, what? It's the opposite of what we would do.
Because actually, I don't believe in legacy as in like, did you get your name on the side of the building? But I do believe in legacy as all the tiniest things. It's like who is reading that eulogy, first of all. It might, sometimes I ask people to visualize that. It depends on what their family setup is or whatever. But sometimes I say visualize who that person might be reading it. What would you want them to say? What you in 40, 50 years time, do you like start from that very, like the building blocks? Was she somebody who had lots of friends, or did she have a few very close friends? Was she someone who traveled the world, or was she somebody who was known as a homebody? Or, was she somebody who was always at the theatre? Or did she just, write her own books or her own plays at home? Like, just like really straightforward, everyday things. And it's amazing what people put down on the page. And then I always say, go away and just like come back to our next session and just tell me what you thought about that. And without, I don't think there's ever been an exception really. Without exception, people will come back and say, so this is what I want to work on. So this is what I want to shift. And it might be as big as job changes, relationship changes, whatever, but it might be as small as making health shifts, or somebody decided that actually, they were going to make the move to another country and start dating a different sex to the one they were currently dating. And, and that was all from writing this person's eulogy. This person thought, yeah, I can't die having not had those parts of my story as some chapters, at least, even if it doesn't work out, technically. So that's where we start. So I think the question was like, how do you get women to be confident in like finding that voice in that story? Yeah, and we go there often.
Like, I want to live till forever, but let's say, I die in my 80s, I'll be grateful if I can live that long. And like looking back to now, I hope that I can look back and say, yeah, I sucked at these things, but I did these things, versus I was really good at the predictable things that I'm good at, which is yelling at people all the time. Like I did other things too. And like also, what's the relationship that I would want to have with myself? Because I think, like you said earlier on, this people pleasing and this being there for everyone else, and your friend the example you'd given with the agent, finding that person that kind of fits your bailiwick. I think that's what we do because it's comfort and it's all we know. But to be able to sort of break from those chains or those cages would be ideal. Like that would be my ultimate goal. If I work backwards from there till now, what is one or two things that I can look back and say, God, I failed at miserably, but God, I did it, because anything I failed at, I've learned so much. You know,
and also like the parameters, like the metrics of success once you're in your 80s. Will you remember that 100 people listen to your podcast or 10,000 people listen to your podcast? No, you'll remember that you had that conversation and then that led you to do this, and then you started this project or whatever.
Yeah.
Or will you remember that your book sold this many copies or that many copies? Not really. Yeah, there'll be ballpark kind of areas, but the stuff that we all get quite hung up on, like there's quite actually a wide range of what is deemed successful, really. But if you think about that person in your 80s,
it's not the likes that we had on our stories and crap that we all struggle with. Oh, this many followers means I'm successful, this many likes. But how do you measure the quality of the conversations that are happening in the background because you put this one thing out, like you said, a book or a conversation or what? And the way people feel after that, you can't measure that. And for some reason, we keep living on this other metric of, well, if you have a crap load of people that support you, then that means you've made it. And I think the process of making it is making it. The artist that decides to write a song and then sing it and then put it out, that's the making it, versus 17,000 people on Spotify started to like them. So how do we like flip that? Because even today, we as much as we're starting to think less about the money and those kinds of things, we still in some ways are measuring success in the fancy purses and the fancy whatever it is that we're doing to look and feel good on the outside. So do you have some like tips or advice and some of your own experience to help us remember that, going back to what does it mean to live an authentic life?
It's something that really changed for me when we left London. And for anybody who hasn't heard the Moth story, like I won't go into it all now, but we changed our lives quite radically for mental health reasons as well. And I would say over the last 3-4 years, what I've really realized is that you don't have to live at like one end of the spectrum or the other. Like when I first moved to like this farmhouse in the countryside, I was like, okay, so I'm just going to wear like old t-shirts and denim cut-offs, and I'm going to get rid of all my fancy dresses, and I'll never wear makeup again, and I'll just go for really long healthy hikes. But I'm not somebody who likes walking particularly in nature, so I stopped that after a year. I do really appreciate beautiful trees and beautiful landscapes, but I'm not somebody who is ever going to really hike and love it. I'm somebody who really loves the aesthetic. Like I really enjoy prints and colour and fabric and fashion. I love fashion. That hasn't disappeared for me, but I'm more truthful about how I choose things. I'm more mindful, I suppose. I think I definitely used to shop for like a dopamine hit, and I'm much slower at choosing things these days. And I kind of make fun of myself a lot more in that, yeah, I do like a really posh hotel bar, and I do really like fanciness, but I also like really simple things, like, I don't know, like just lying on the grass with my kids and like hanging out here, like in wearing my pajamas all day, not putting my contacts in, just mucking around. So I think like understanding that we're all high-low, like we can all, if we're privileged enough to be able to access these things as well, then like I try and enjoy all those things, like eating like really cheap kind of canteen food, like on a stool, but I also like a really fancy white tablecloth restaurant. I'm just more mindful these days of the real privilege, like the real beauty is to be found in, well, it sounds cliched, but it is really true, is like the company that you keep, feeling you with other people, and like jokes, like lols, as we say in England, like who can you have lols with? Like, because that doesn't matter if you're just sitting in like, a McDonald's drive-through, if you're laughing your head off with somebody, like that is the best evening. If you're at a really expensive restaurant, behaving very appropriately, but you're having a kind of lackluster conversation, well, I mean, who cares like what the fancy meal is? I mean, it's just like, it's irrelevant. So I'm kind of much more aware of that now. Also because I'm aware of the passing of time a bit more these days. Yeah. So how do I want to spend this day? And also because like I've been to a lot of the parties, I've been to a lot of some of the fancy places, and yeah, I've had some amazing experiences, sure, but like some of the best moments in my life have been the most simple, that have been like, or the most unexpected, or like sitting in, we call them shopping centres, I think you call them malls, yeah. But like sitting in a small town mall, right, waiting for my kids, having a conversation with another mum who's a friend of mine, and just like kicking back on a seat with like a Diet Coke for a couple of hours. Like, sometimes those can be like the best afternoons, not quite sure why, but you had an amazing conversation and everyone was getting on great. And it was really funny when this weird thing happened. So I think also it's about remaining curious to the world and knowing that like, stuff always like happens, right? If you're looking, you just don't walk past it.
Yeah.
And also that things are always changing. That's the only certainty, isn't it, about life, that everything will change. If things are a bit boring right now or stagnant or whatever, like just keep your eye out, like look for the clues, because it doesn't have to be like a big dramatic change, where you're like, I'm moving to Bali, or I'm going off with like the woodcutter or whatever, like it doesn't have to be some weird, you can just be like, I'm going to start doing a yoga class. And then you meet that person who says to go and do this. And then you do this. Like, it's just about trying to follow your gut. I think that's what I try and do a lot more of these days. Like, really trust. Oh, yeah, my gut is saying, don't bother going to that thing. Yeah, it's really amazing sounding. You're not going to like it. Then I don't go. Whereas 10 years ago, I went because it was appropriate that I went and everyone else was going, and it sounded like it was meant to be like a fun Saturday. Like I really like obsessively watching box sets and hanging out with my kids, or like I watch like really old episodes of The Simpsons, like watch like 10 episodes in one, and I like stuff like that too. I also like a flashy party, sure, and I love to dance, but like I just think it's really important to embrace all those aspects of yourself, to be able to have fun, like wherever you are. I think that's like one of the most important life skills. Can you be really happy, like on a kind of bumpy old bus, leaving Marrakesh, eating a sandwich, like sitting next to like a sheep, this happened to me a few years ago, or can you be just as happy at a black tie event? Like if you can kind of be equally content in both, I think you've worked it all out.
Yeah, just living in those spaces in between, I think, are kind of can help shape us in some ways too, because it is interesting. Many of us live in that all or nothing, one or the other. We've been taught those extremes to live in, and very little have we been taught about what are those spaces in between, those transitions. While we're waiting for the black tie invite, are we going to, like not live and like a robot, just take our batteries out until we go there? Or are we going to charge up and through these little tiny ways? And I think recently something that really helped me was I had the privilege of going to a cousin's wedding in Mexico, and with very close family. And somebody asked me like, oh, like, what was your favorite thing about the whole trip? And I was like, you know what? there's so many cool events. It's like a full-on Indian wedding. So you can imagine how much fun we had with all these sorts of things, which were really great. But probably for me, a highlight that I'll hold up is the warm Mexican sun on my back while sitting with my brother and my sister and my brother's partner, my cousins, just by the pool. Like I feel like, you know, when your life flashes before your eyes, I hope that's one memory that will be what flashes before my eyes. I felt kind of close to home, I guess is the best way I could say it. Just having that warm sun on my back. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this is what I need. And you had mentioned earlier in our conversation, this rest that a lot of us don't get to grow up with, particularly women. It's go, go, go. But many of us live in this, you know, productive hustle, kind of bustle culture. And maybe you can speak to what rest means to you and how that helped you in this process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very good at rest. I mean, if Jennifer, who I do the podcast with, was listening to this, there'd be a hollow laughter. Where do I sit with rest? It's like an ongoing battle for me, because like my ambition has come back as my kids are older. I'm not naturally a very balanced person. I'm quite all or nothing. So if I'm doing something, I'm like really, really doing it, and then I go to sleep. So I don't exist very easily in the middle of, I'll write for 2 hours, then I'll put it down, then I'll go for a walk, then I'll meet a friend, then I'll do another hour, and then I'll cook for my children. Like that day I would love to have, but for whatever reason, it doesn't work with my kind of brain. My kind of brain is more kids leave, house is a mess, work really intensely, go, oh my God, I haven't eaten. Okay, remember to eat. Go outside, but I'm thinking about it still, kind of eat, then doom scroll often, even though I'm teaching myself not to. And then the kids get home and then I go, okay, enough. So so look, I speak to clients about this quite openly because I'm really aware that, you know, for example, a lot of coaches will speak about, you know, the healthiest way to work and how it's imperative to have your 11:15 11s or, you know, and then take a break. You must walk at lunchtime or whatever. Yeah, I could totally subscribe to all of this, and that is brilliant. But that's not always how some of us can do it. So I'm somebody who needs to kind of finish the project, and then I'll go, okay, so then I'm not going to do anything for a week because I've handed that thing in, and then I'll just kind of like collapse and have a nice time. And I'm just more at peace these days with understanding that is who I am. It's very artificial for me to have a kind of timetabled day. I mean, sure, I can learn a bit from that, and that it's important for me to eat some protein at lunch or not subsist entirely on coffee. You know, like I've taken it down a few notches, so I'm not living just on adrenaline. But that's the best that I can do if I'm going to do things, and that's how I remain creative. So when I'm doing something creative like writing, I have to have a slightly uncomfortable edge to it. You know, I have to be like, I can't be like light a candle, beautiful music. I kind of have to be a little bit hunched over to do it. That's just who I am.
Last minute sometimes. Can I just say, like, I really, really, really appreciate you outing yourself, or maybe just being honest, however we want to say it. Because I don't know, I feel like I could sense like exhaling when people listen to this, because for me, I even appreciate that, because sometimes I think I'm really grateful for you saying this, because there's so much pressure to do so many things in so many different ways. And every few years, things change. Like today's trend is doing one thing, tomorrow's trend is something else, and we're all trying to figure it out. And a lot of us don't even know what we want. Present party, you know, right here. Like I'm just trying to also figure that stuff out. And there's a lot of guilt when you see things, or you're on Instagram or wherever, and you see all these people that have their shit together and they're doing all these things, and you think, oh, I should be doing that too. And so I appreciate your realness, because you're like, I'm just trying to be the best at being me. So is there anything that you wish, Salima, that I'd asked you today that maybe I didn't, or that you want to go back and clarify or add to?
No, I think I'm pretty clear. I'm very aware of my words these days. And when I kind of shoot them out into the world, I kind of always mean them.
Yeah.
So no going back.
I love it. Yeah. Okay, so maybe you can help do a call to action. If there was like one thing and only one thing our listeners left with today, what do you hope they leave with?
That in terms of probability, I think it's something like, and sorry for any scientists that are listening, it's something like 4 trillion to 1 are the odds of you being born. So you are miraculous that you're here. I don't mean this in any particularly religious way. I just mean it from a very human point of view. It is like scientifically mental that you are here, like standing on this earth, breathing right now. And it'll be over at some point. You know, I hope, dear listener, it won't be over for a long time, but it will be at some point. So leap where you can. If you need to leap out of anything, off anything, you're not always guaranteed safety nets. So leap if you really feel the urge, you know, to go for something. If that voice in your head keeps saying, go for it, try it, move there, speak to that person, well, there's something in that always. You know, you might not get the outcome that you want, but you might needed to have had that conversation, or you might needed to have lived in Spain for a year or whatever, right? But the outcome isn't necessarily like the win always, but it's often that feeling in you is because you need it as like the next chapter in you. Just keep coming back to you, keep coming back to yourself. What do you want? Like, what do you really, really want? It's very rare, I think, as women, we ask ourselves that, because it's that we kind of, fine. No, I'm fine. No, don't worry. It's all fine. It's fine. I don't really mind. No, I'm quite comfortable here. I'm okay. And sure, maybe you are kind of okay, but like, really, what do you dream of? What do you think of? And maybe like your dream isn't possible in its absolute purity. You know, like maybe you want to travel to the North Pole, or maybe you'll never make it to the North Pole, but maybe you could make it to somewhere like that has that kind of look and feel, or is it, you know, is the reason that you want to go to the North Pole because you want to adventure? But could that adventure like even be down the road from you? Like, I don't know, climbing some hills, climbing some mountains. Like, do you just need to feel that in you? Yeah. There's so many versions of that. I think dreams don't always have to be taken really literally. You know, it's like, what's that feeling that you're looking for? And it could be ultimately something really mundane that you need, like something very trivial. Like I always say, some of the biggest change you can do in front of the telly, you know, because you can just be like watching Netflix and going, oh my God, yeah, I would love that. Or I would love to feel that. Or how come he's so moved by that? I haven't been moved like that for years. Oh, Jesus Christ, why not? You're your best detective for your own life. And I think we will owe it to ourselves to be, we have this character in Britain, this Agatha Christie character called Miss Marple, and she's like a little old granny kind of 1950s detective. And I always say, like, be your own Miss Marple. You really owe it to yourself. Like, what are the clues that you're getting that you're on the right path or that you're not? Is everything kind of like sticking? There's no flow here. There's a reason for that. You know, you're not in the right place. So that's fine. It's not a disaster. Just to keep being a detective. Keep going, okay, so interesting. None of those things are working for me. These things are. Yeah, so a call to arms. Yeah, come back to you.
I love that. Lastly, on the show, we always close with a little rebellion and a lot of heart. We ask our guests to put their middle fingers up to something. What would you like to put your middle fingers up to today?
Artifice, like pretense, specifically people who say things they really don't mean, like run. They say, don't they? You know, like believe it when you see it. Mm. And I think really stick your fingers up at that. Like stick your middle finger up at that. If you see that kind of behavior or that kind of somebody is doing the opposite to what they're saying, or you can read it in their eyes. No, they're not happy for you actually, or it doesn't all match. Like really stick your two, I'm doing it now, stick your two fingers.
I'll join you.
Yeah. And like really like get out of there, because that is so telling, I think, about a human if they behave like that. I'm quite vigilant about that with female friendships in particular now. Like I don't have to have anything much in common with you to be my dear friend. You know, like I want to laugh with you, but I really just want us to be like, yes, go for it, come on. I really want the best for you. And that isn't how I've always chosen friendships in the past, or, you know, I haven't always had those people in my life. So I'm really conscious now in my 40s to be really aware. And like, I think it's I like this phrase, like sticking your middle finger up at something, because often as women we're like, hang on, that's not polite, or okay, it's a bit aggressive, calm down, it's a bit angry. Actually, you know, those kind of behaviors deserve like a really firm kickback. They don't deserve I'm sorry, I don't want to be here, and I scuttle away. They deserve like, fuck you. Mm-hmm. No, I see you. You are not allowed to come anywhere near me. I will not allow this energy near me. So yeah, that's why I would stick. Yeah.
Really well said, that fuck you. Yeah. So if people want to find you, connect with you, get coaching with you, where can they find you?
So I have a website, which is www.salimasaxton.com. And there you can get in touch with me. So all elements of my work are there.
And we'll have it up in the show notes. We want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming on today. We always say these conversations are door openers. We're just scratching the surface, just starting to get deep. And today's conversation felt like, I was going to say a love letter, but maybe it's a eulogy to all the parts of ourselves that we've been taught to hide, and the parts that have been silenced, softened, set aside. You know, let's bring those out. Let's find those parts. I hope everyone got a little piece of themselves out of today's conversation. If you want to add to this, you now know where to find Salima. You know where to find us here at MFU. Make sure you check out Salima's work. We didn't get to talk about her podcast, Women Are Mad. Great conversations follow her. And thank you again, Salima, for your time. I hope to have you back again to chat more.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.